What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I'm break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about Tesla, SPY, Nvda, and the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there, and break down what's happening to the markets, what you should be watching for, and some very important data that's going to be coming out as well that will shake the markets. But before I say anything about all this information, before I talk about what's going on with the news affecting Tesla, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. I am personally not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, in just about 7 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so Tesla was down 3.27% for the day, getting a nice pop near the very open, once again trying to test its resistance before getting a big rejection and continuing to break below this 265 support. After that happened, we had 262.5 to hold for there to be any hope for Tesla, and Tesla ended up breaking below that, and the bulls lost their control, and Tesla came all the way down to 255. I warned you guys about this potential move down to the mid 250s if we broke below 262.5, and that's what ended up happening, and that's very important for Tesla. But the question is, how will the market move for tomorrow? What's going to affect Tesla? I'm going to break that down first before I talk about the share prices of all these different tickers. Now, first off, we have SPY with a max pain of $449 for tomorrow. That is going to be very important considering that we have a 2.25 put to call ratio. And also, we have over 1 million puts expiring tomorrow with just under 500,000 calls. So the majority of positions are going to be on the put side, and the market makers are going to be watching this 449 max pain. I think this is going to be a very critical level for tomorrow, so make sure you watch it very carefully. We're currently about 0.78% above that right now, so make sure you're very, very careful going into tomorrow and watch that level carefully. Now, to add on to this, I just want to mention that we have some earnings coming out, but they're not going to be as significant, so I will talk more about these tomorrow. We have Ford, Intel, and Roku about to announce their earnings and their earnings calls very soon. I'm not going to be recording this during that time, so make sure you're just ready for this. It's not going to be as impactful for the markets, though, as something else, such as like Microsoft or like Apple, but it's worth noting. I will talk more later on about all these earnings, and we're going to find out more information. But what's going to be more important than these, at least for tomorrow, by the time the market opens, for how the market opens too, is going to be the PCE data that's coming out. That's going to be more impactful. I want to focus more on this. This is going to be one of the major inflationary measures for the economy. Now, this data itself is not going to be as big as other reports because it's going to be for the month of June, but it is going to be impactful for the markets to some degree because, once again, this is the Fed's favorite metric of looking at inflationary data, and there's a good chance it's going to be pretty decent. So looking at how CPI was quite decent for the month of June. So we're going to be watching this and seeing how this affects the markets. Now, in my opinion, it's going to be aligning with expectations, with year over year being like 3.8% or lower, actually lower than the 2.9% forecast. But core is what's going to be more important as it's currently at like 4.3%, still quite sticky. So we want to see it actually around that forecast or lower. It's most likely going to be as expected or lower, which is going to be good for the markets just to start us off most likely. Now we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report coming out in the morning as well. This will affect the markets too, so make sure you're ready for some volatility after the first 30 minutes at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time or New York time for tomorrow. And besides that, that's pretty much all the data that's coming out besides earnings. Now let's talk about some news affecting Tesla and some data before I break down the charts. Now, the Model X listings are continuing to go up. They're continuing to increase, which is not so good. But besides that, everything else is quite stable with the Model Y sales going up as the inventory levels are falling. Now, the news is also saying things about Tesla. We have this article coming out, and I do apologize that this ad is like coming up. I can't really get rid of this, but there are 5 concerns about Tesla that many investors are talking about. The news has been quite negative. They're saying that Tesla's overvalued according to some investors. Tesla's due for some downside and this and that. There's also talks about how earnings for Tesla are projected to be dropping by 25% for 2023, with revenue growth of about 10%. They're also saying that the equity sells for about 90 times forward earnings and 9 times forward revenue. So they're saying that it's very, very overvalued compared to companies like Ford and GM. And we're seeing Tesla getting some criticism because of it. We're also seeing signs that they're talking about how consumer demand is going to be decreasing. They're talking about other things about Tesla's numbers not really being able to meet some production expectations, and they're also talking about declining margins. So lots of negative news is coming out about Tesla. There's also this headline coming out saying that Tesla EVs are apparently overestimating the range when fully charged. Once again, all this news about Tesla is just so negative. It's just once again bashing Tesla after the negative earnings reports guidance that came out. That's important to note. If they keep this up, this could be negative for tomorrow. Now, to add on to this, the price price ratio is falling. Tesla's losing some relative strength, excuse me. And then we have Morgan Stanley, who are reiterating that Tesla is going to perform equally with the markets. So far, it's close to what Tesla has been doing, but it's actually underperforming just a bit. Fridays tend to be green only about 48% of the time for Tesla. It tends to be one of the weakest days of the week. And don't forget, the second and fourth hours tend to be better hours for Tesla, especially the fourth hour. And besides that, we did see the short interest. We actually don't have live data for it right now. I think sometimes this happens to it. The last time I checked it, it was actually just the same as yesterday, so not really much of a change for it. Looking at the short volume, however, the volume is like only 103 million, so a little bit lower, which is a decent sign. We're not selling off an extremely high volume, but the short volume is currently at about this 53% area, so a little bit higher than what we saw before. There's a little bit more shorting going on, but the question is, how will Tesla move going forward? What do I think is very likely? So what I'm basically eyeing for tomorrow is a potential pop near the pre-market because of the PCE report. I think the market's going to try to gap up tomorrow morning. But then I think because SPY has a 449 max pain, the market's going to sell off a little bit more. And I think this is going to eventually drag Tesla down. And then I'm going to determine if we can get a bounce or not, depending on the values and how the candles are looking and things like that. Also on volume. But for now, I think it's very likely we're going to try to bounce in the pre-market. We're going to see Tesla retest like 260 or so, close to where this 20 EMA is, maybe a little bit higher than that, because this is downtrending. It's going to be like a lot lower by tomorrow morning. So maybe above the 20 EMA, getting close to like the 50. I think Tesla's going to be around this like 260 area by the time we open. Then it's going to continue to sell off. And I think we're going to retest 255. And if that fails us, we're going to be watching this thing get very close to 250. And 250 is going to be major support for Tesla. It has to hold 250. There's some support at 253.68, of course, but 250 is going to be more pivotal. It has to hold that. If it fails to hold 250, it is going to get a big rug pull all the way down to like 243 the last time I checked around that area, 243 to 244. And if that fails us, then 240 to 238 becomes very possible. But for now, we're going to be watching for a potential pump in the morning, a nice gap up, then some downside after that. I think this is going to happen to most tickers out there. I think SPY is going to gap up very close to like 454 to 455, then reject off of this and start selling off. And it's going to eventually retest this max pain right here. So max pain for tomorrow is right here at this 449 level, right about here. And I think we're going to see a test of 449 for tomorrow to 450 between that area. So maybe a gap up, a big drop there, maybe a bounce intraday, then another test there and a close that's going to be kind of weak. But then the market could rebound next week for Apple's earnings. And we will see what happens with Apple's earnings. That's going to dictate how the market moves going forward, of course. But I just want to note that for SPY, I'm seeing something very similar. I think that's going to dictate Tesla, or at least play a role. I think NIO is going to follow this trend as it is starting to look bearish with this head and shoulders forming on it. We might see NIO slow down a bit, but that's completely fine because NIO has potential to bounce going into the month of August. There's a very good chance it has some bullish price action coming because I think deliveries are going to be quite good for the stock. Looking at Apple, we're going to be looking for a potential gap up to 194, a rejection, and maybe some downside down to this 192 area. And if anything, watch these levels very carefully. Below 192.5, we have 191. 191 point. Last time I checked, I think it was 191.3 around there. 191.32 is going to be the next major support if we do break below 192, and then we have 190 below that. For resistance, watch 193.77 and then 194. I think we're going to gap up to 194 around that area, then reject and come down to the 192 range. For the triple Q, I think there's a good chance it's going to test 378. That's going to be our next resistance. 380 also has some resistance. Not sure it's going to go that high. I think 378 is very possible. Then a rejection off that is going to just start cooling off for these lower levels. And if it breaks below 375 tomorrow, I'm going to be watching 373 for the gap fill. And I think it's very likely the QQQ is going to do that. For Nvda, I'm going to be watching for a nice bounce to this like 465 area around here. I think Nvidia is going to try to bounce in the morning, try to rebound a little bit, and it could try to push a little higher, closer to like 470 or so, maybe come a little short, and then it's going to reject just like the market and start cooling off one more time. And we might see it retest these lows that we saw from today, if not go a little bit lower. But Nvidia has some relative strength compared to the market. I just think that it is due for a slight pullback, which is going to be completely normal. It could be forming a head and shoulders. Here we have a possible like left shoulder and a head. Might come up to form like a right shoulder, then come right back down. And it may cool off a little bit more before getting a bounce next week. For Microsoft, you're going to be watching potential bounce and a retest of 333, then a rejection and this thing to come down to 327, which is the last major support area that it had the last time I checked it. Way back here, this is like 327 area. So we're going to be watching it very carefully. I have a feeling it's going to gap up, then drop after that. And we're going to be watching this 331 to 333 area for Microsoft. AMD is the same thing. I'm going to be watching 113 as resistance. Could be forming like a right shoulder as well. Then make its way down to like 109 if we do get a rejection. Going to be watching for 113 to be tested and another sell off after that. So be very careful with that moving forward. I'm going to skip to the dollar now. I just want to mention that the dollar is continuing to look strong. It's cooling off just a bit, so we might see the dollar cool off in the morning because the market may pump just a little bit, and then we might see the dollar bounce off one of these EMAs, maybe around 101, maybe around 101.5, somewhere around there it should bounce. And if we get that bounce on the dollar, it could drag the market down even lower. For Google, same thing, may gap up to about 131 or so, then reject to come down to 128. I'm seeing the same thing for Amazon, basically a retest of like 130 and then a rejection, a potential retest of like 126. That's a possibility for Amazon. It is looking a little bit weak. Looking at the current trend, could be forming once again an inverse cup in hand, or even like this inverse structure. If that's the case, more downside is very possible. Meta has this imbalance down here around this like 297 area. Going to be watching for a bounce and a retest of like 316 to 320. Then a rejection, this thing to come all the way down to about 305 to test the 200 EMA on the 30 minutes time frame. However, if it breaks below that, if it breaks below 305, we're going to be watching for this imbalance fill at 297. So that's also very possible. But that's basically what I'm eyeing for the markets. We're going to be watching to see what happens with the PCE reports. So far, the market's kind of green with Intel. I think Intel is trying to pump a bit, but I will talk more about that tomorrow. We're just waiting for the guidance call, of course. But this is what I'm seeing for Tesla. We're going to be watching for a potential bounce tomorrow morning, then maybe a rejection, a little bit more downside. I think the market may dictate how Tesla ends up moving. I want to keep this one kind of short. Make sure you're ready and prepared for some more downside just in case for the markets. And make sure you do what you have to do. It's very important to remain calm, cool, and collected. All right, thank you for listening. I want to keep this video kind of short. Tesla to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright. And peace out.